Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to welcome you today to our side events, The Role of Due Diligence, International Corporations and Human Rights Protections, organized by the Institute for Human Rights. Corporate responsibility in human rights due diligence is a fundamental process that enables companies to proactively identify, prevent, and address human rights risks associated with their operations. The UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights introduced the Protect, Respect, and Remedy framework, emphasizing that businesses must integrate due diligence at every stage of their work. Conducting responsible business means ensuring that products and services are not linked to exploitation, corruption, or environmental damage. To support companies in conducting effective due diligence, the OECD due diligence guidance outlines a five-step framework that provides a structured approach to responsible business conduct. Our speakers today will particularly focus on how to identify, respond, and address cases of misconduct. This includes best practices for risk assessment, effective response strategies, and accountability mechanisms to ensure business do not contribute or benefit from human rights violations. Today's panel includes Director of Institute for Human Rights, Mr. Amin Husseinov, lawyer and strategic legal advisor, senior researcher at Public Integrity Research Group and University of Lugano, Semna Shadkhan, and joining us online by his video intervention, chairman of the National Whistleblower Center, leading U.S. whistleblower attorney, Mr. Stephen Cohn. I also would like to remind you that according to UN rules, taking any recordings during the side event is prohibited. I now, with no further ado, will give the floor to our first speaker, Mr. Semna Shadkhan, who will introduce us to the key aspects of due diligence in responsible business and investment. Sam, the floor is yours, and the presentation is coming right.
You need to turn it on. Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me for this event. And today I'm going to speak about a bit, share my knowledge about due diligence in cross-border investment, preventing corruption, and protecting human rights. And the subtitle of my topic is Empowering Ethical Investment Practices for International Stability. Just for concerning changing a slide, I can. Okay. In my speech, next slide, please. In my speech, I'm going to speak about the role of due diligence in responsible investment, corruption, and human rights risk in investment, strengthening due diligence key strategies, the role of technology in ensuring transparency, risk of terrorist financing in cross-border investment, empowering global cooperation and capacity building, and finally conclusions and call to action. Next slide, please. Okay, as an introduction, I would like to say that cross-border investment is a powerful tool for economic development and global process. That, as we see nowadays, that cross-border investment is a very important instrument in political level, social level, economical level. So we cannot be without international investment and funding. We can call it in general. However, when not properly managed, it can contribute to corruption, human rights violation, and instability. So we need to consider objective, strengthening due diligence practice to ensure investment, uphold human rights, transparency, and ethical governance. Next slide. The role of due diligence in responsible investment. Okay, what I'm going to speak about it. First of all, to understand it, we need to know the standard definition of due diligence. Due diligence is the systematic process investors undertake to assess risk and compliance before engaging in foreign investment. So it is a general definition, but it has a lot of areas that needs to be analyzed, examined, and expertise. Key areas are financial and legal human rights, anti-corruption, environmental, and social impact. So as a financial and legal, ensuring economic feasibility and regulatory compliance. As a human rights, preventing labor exploitation and disposition and discrimination. For anti-corruption, decreasing bribery, illegal financing, and financial crime. Environment and social impact, protecting biocultural diversity, because mostly they focus on environment. I consider here protecting biocultural diversity and community rights. The goal here is ensure investments are responsible, sustainable, and harmonized with international human rights principles. Next slide, please. Corruption and human rights risk in investment. I made this part to two different slides. That a part of it is about exporting terrorism. That I'll tell it next. But for this part, I explain about corruption challenges, bribery, money laundering, and lack of transparency, weakness governance, increase inequality, and reduce public trust. For human rights violation, labor rights abuses, like forced labor, low wage, unsafe conditions. For land right conflicts, displacement of indigenous and local communities, environmental degradation, threats to biodiversity and public health. Impacts: destabilized economics, fuels unrest, and damage reputation of investors and states. That it is an important part. Strengthening due diligence key strategies. So in general, we have a 3 level of due diligence. It is pre-investment, during investment, post-investment. For pre-investment, comprehensive risk assessment focusing on human rights and corruption risk, engagement with local communities and stakeholders for informed decision making. For during investment, it is important implementation of corporate accountability mechanisms, regular audits and monitoring to ensure ethical compliance. Post-investment, it is usually transparency in financial reporting to prevent illicit flows, predict evaluation of social and environmental impact. The role of technology in ensuring transparency is one of the most important parts to prevent corruption via due diligence. To use artificial intelligence, AI, identifies corruption risk, prevent corruption and deceptive activities. Blockchain technology ensures transparent and traceable investment flows. Data analysis detects high-risk regions and sectors. Goal of this part is leverage technology to increase accountability and empower oversight mechanisms. So I would add here that for artificial intelligence, we made a program platform for public procurement that it works, this project, based on fully artificial intelligence with the University of UCI, University of Lugano, that we had a practice in this regard. Risk of terrorism financing in cross-border investment. That is main part that it needs to be considered. Unintended risk as investment in conflict-prone or weakly regulated region may be misused to fund illicit activities. Consequences: economic destabilization, displacement, and heightened security risk. Preventive measures here are strict due diligence in high-risk investment regions, compliance with UN and international sanctions, collaboration with regulatory authorities to ensure investment integrities. Empowering global cooperation and capacity building. Role of government, strength, legal and policy framework to ensure responsible investment. Encourage transparency and accountability in foreign direct investment. And in international organization role can be promote cross-border cooperation to prevent illicit financial flows. Strength investment dispute resolution mechanism to integrate human rights concern, and capacity building that it is important, training for investors, regulators, and civil society to ethical investment, empowering local communities to advocate for their rights and demand corporate accountability. And finally, conclusion and call to action. Ethical investment is not only legal obligation, but a moral imperative. Investors, governments, and international organizations must work together to ensure stronger due diligence practices, zero tolerance to and human rights violations, sustainable investment that fosters peace and stability. By upholding this principle, we can turn investment into a force for positive global transformation. Thank you very much for your attention and consideration.
Thank you, Sam. And indeed, it is within the responsibility of the businesses to maintain efficient due diligence, though needless to say that responsible business conduct is not only a corporate action, it also requires strong governmental measures to prevent and counter corruption that erodes trust and enables human rights abuses. And with this being said, I will now turn to our video intervention by Mr. Stephen Cohn, who will address the negative impact of corruption and how to efficiently counter it at the governmental level.
Hi, I'm Steve Cohn, the chairman of the board of the National Whistleblower Center, and an attorney who has represented whistleblowers for over 40 years. Many of my clients have been from countries around the world and in major anti-corruption cases, such as the Danske Bank money laundering case, the Greek Farm Practices Act case, and many more. Doing these international cases, I came to learn that the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act that prohibits bribery to get a business advantage is not only the most important transnational anti-corruption law ever passed, highly effective, and it targets big bribes against high government officials that are the most destructive to human rights, democracy building, and the rule of law. Because if ministers and presidents and high-level officials are bribed up, the country itself loses its democratic nature. Authoritarianism rises, and most significantly, why are these companies paying bribes? To rip off the people, increase prices, steal natural resources. So foreign bribery is done for profit. The profit hurts the people who need those resources and those economic opportunities the most. So the FCPA is a big deal. Just recently, our president, Mr. Donald Trump, has frozen the U.S. prosecutions under the FCPA. He's paused it for 180 days to reevaluate the cause. Now, this is highly significant because the United States has been the #1 prosecutor worldwide for the FCPA. So for the United States to back down after all of its efforts over the past 50 years is potentially a devastating blow to worldwide anti-corruption. So what is going on? What do we do? What's fascinating, although the U.S. has been the #1 prosecutor, what we have learned is that governments around the world, even though they haven't passed strong bribery laws, have been working with the United States hand in hand on many of the largest, most significant prosecutions. The German, Brazil, UK, Swiss. So what looks on paper to be an American case is often done in conjunction with the law enforcement agencies of numerous countries. We also know that the majority of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act prosecutions concern companies that are not based in the United States. This is because the FCPA is truly a transnational anti-corruption law. I don't want to go into the details of how broad it is and its jurisdictional nature. Just I'll say that we calculated the billions collected in fines and penalties. And over the past 10 years, 71% of those recoveries come from non-US companies. So you're looking at a true global anti-corruption law fighting one of the worst means of corruption and human rights violations out there. Now it's frozen. What is to be done? Though there's an old saying that out of crises comes opportunity. And what should happen, what needs to happen, is that the world community that had been reliant upon the United States to lead these prosecutions, it is very simple for the Serious Fraud Office in the UK, for the same prosecutors who have been working with the United States to use their domestic anti-corruption laws and fill the gap. They have the same powers, the same sanctioning authority, the same democratic infrastructure which would let them hold these corporations and top officials accountable. I understand that it was easy to rely on the United States. I think you can almost compare it to NATO. It's easy if someone's picking up the tab and you can help, but the interests, the concerns, the problems that are being driven by this law can't be forgotten. It's too big. It's too important. It's been around too long. So it's now time for the government to increase their laws and their sanctions, for the prosecutors who were working with the United States to consider initiating the cases on their own. The OECD has every country in the European Union has their own local Foreign Corrupt Practices Act based on the American model. Other countries, Australia, United Kingdom, Japan, Brazil, Korea, many countries, South Africa, have their own FCPAs modeled on the US. They need to activate them and start using them, just like they used the US law. Now, some of the laws are not as good, and most don't have the same whistleblower protections that the United States has. So let me just go over what the countries need to do. If they need to do it through legislation, it should get passed quickly. If they have the laws in place, start using them. The funny part here is that President Trump said he was tired of US companies being picked on. But we now know the overwhelming majority of the prosecutions weren't even US companies. But if the United States is going to slow down holding US companies accountable for foreign bribery, it's up to the countries in Europe and the members of the OECD. They can prosecute those US companies just like the United States did. So what's the framework we need? So first, the US law is radically successful because it incentivizes detection. They understand that whistleblowers, the insiders, are the key to detect bribery. No bribes are paid in public. No bribes are advertised. A good bribe is one that no one will ever know occurred. So consequently, the need for insiders to detect foreign bribery is intense, is essential. We've learned that. So in the United States, we have a framework, protection against retaliation, monetary awards, where if someone takes the risk of their job, of their career, even maybe their lives, putting their families at risk, they can be monetarily awarded. That structure has worked and it can be duplicated in every country. The United Kingdom is close to enacting it. They did investigations into the law and found out that it worked really well, and their Serious Fraud Office has been urging now to adopt this methodology. Second, high fines. In looking over the OECD reports, often someone's caught in bribery outside of the United States under another country's law, and they don't get sanctioned that much, 50,000, 100,000 euros. US law gets them in the millions. There have been billion-dollar sanction cases, all based on the profit earned by paying a bribe. All must be forfeited. So if a company paid a bribe and profited $300 million from that, they got to pay that $300 million back on top of all the other fines and penalties. You have to take the profit out of bribery. So all laws can easily be amended to achieve that. Third, in the United States, we have a civil and a criminal component to the FCPA. Most of the cases are resolved civilly. Why is that a big deal? In a civil case, many of the protections afforded criminals don't exist. Most significantly is the right against self-incrimination. If you charge someone criminally under the FCPA, they don't have to take the stand. They can plead what's known as the Fifth Amendment. They don't have to incriminate themselves. And they have many other procedural rights. But if it's a civil case and the only thing at issue is monetary damages, there is no right against self-incrimination. And if one of the people involved in the bribery is called to the stand and refuses to answer the question under the grounds it may incriminate them, the courts can hold that against them, and they can say their failure to testify is evidence of guilt. So these civil laws that only have monetary sanctions, but believe me, that's why the companies are paying the bribes, to make money. And if you can hit them hard and seize all of their profits, believe me, they don't care if a couple executives go to jail, or they don't care what happens to the people in the foreign countries they bribe up. They care about money. So, very simple plan. Detection, enforcement, and heavy sanction. It's all there in the US law. Many countries have already adopted it, but they have not been aggressively using it. And the countries that don't have aggressive FCPAs can easily amend them. In short, this isn't like we don't have a defense industry and it's going to take us years to build a couple tanks. This can happen overnight. And Europe and the EU and the OECD countries can be just as effective as the United States, if not more effective. And guess what? That will force the United States to stay in the game. The goal is to end corruption. The FCPA is the most valuable tool. It must be aggressively used. So thank you so much for listening. It's been an honor to be here. Thank you.
A very clear. I can see the microphone on. If it's possible to, in the audience, can you turn it off, please? The audio just next to you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Excuse me for that. Yeah, indeed, it was a very clear message from Stephen Cohen. And out of crisis comes an opportunity, but it seems like the crisis is happening everywhere. First, we had the suspension of the US FCPA, and then the EU omnibus package that was just adopted by the European Commission on February 26, and which includes a couple of proposals to amend the key corporate due diligence directives. The package includes a few striking changes, and namely, limiting due diligence obligations solely to direct business partners, reducing the frequency of due diligence monitoring, and considerably narrowing the definition of the stakeholder. And with this, I would like to turn to our last but not least speaker, Emin Husseinov. Emin, what is your stance on the recent EU changes, and what do you see happening moving forward?
Thank you. So, it's after Trump decision when he signed order pausing enforcement of foreign bribery ban, many international human rights institutions, NGOs which work on preventing corruption publicly criticize this and say it's supposed to be affected soon whole the world. And right after 2 weeks later, what we see, European Union, namely European Commission, produce new amendments packages, which is named omnibus packages, and they try to modify corporate sustainability due diligence directive, and this is clear correlations for they doing this right after Trump decide to ban this law, which is already actively used for the last 25 years and somehow able to increase efforts with due diligence for human rights, paid proper compensation for human rights violations, and make some kind of basis legal mechanism, which is we are always try to, as like civil society, promote and ask like different member states use this revolutionary US law, and some countries already adopted this on the national level. But right now we are very upset about regress, what we see in country like US, and now it's for biggest economy of the world, for stakeholders like transnational corporations, it's not forbidden to just provide the bribes. And many of us from developed world, I'm originally from Azerbaijan, oil-rich country. We are living 30 years in poverty, even like we have lots of mineral resources. But because transnational corporations making deal with the government, and they are doing this without any kind of commitments to support human rights, we have on horizon very good hope for this upcoming corporate sustainable due diligence act give us chance to nations like us to fight for our human rights with these legal mechanisms. And unfortunately, European Commissions, which is produce this and deliver these amendments to European Parliament, and after European Council also must twist these bodies, must revise and vote and adopt this law. And if this adopted, we will have the same effect right after what we saw, what's happened after Mr. Trump's decision. I just want to highlight several important parts of this. First of all, is the scope of corporate sustainable due diligence. If on the current text, companies are required to conduct due diligence on human rights risk across the chain of activities, everyone must be, direct and indirect business partner supposed to be responsible. Right now, they are trying to change this to limited direct business partners with limitation of the direct business partners only. But every one of us knows for if it's work like this, it can give lots of gaps for potential violators to do whatever they want. And this is unfortunately what we saw. This literally copy-paste from German Supply Chain and Due Diligence Act, which is adopted like 2 years ago. And all EU member states supposed to modify their national law and make it better and eligible with this corporate sustainable due diligence directive. But right now what we see, if the modification adopted, many stakeholders will removed automatically for eligible responsible stakeholders. Data collections, for example. Very important part, for example, I would like to say what is important is civil responsibility, because current law, European law, obliged to use this directive and protect potential victims, and this is quite optimizing mechanism, which is many of us always advocating for this, because it's very difficult for small groups like NGOs or victims go and fight with different jurisdictions inside like a EU. And today's, if this modification will be adopted, it's kind of generated serious mess for all vulnerable victims. Also, the period of reporting. If in current text we saw its companies are required to monitor and report on due diligence annually, like each year. Proposed amendments saying the frequencies for monitoring due diligence measures might be reduced to at least once per 5 years. Imagine, like once per 5 years, and everyone who wants to violate anything, like they can say, okay, we are not obliged to publish our reports year by year. Maybe some of the companies, like which is thinking about the public visibility, they can continue to publish this annually. But most of the stakeholders who want to use like a momentum, they can say easily for, look, this is not our problem, it's new modified law, and we do as like clearly described in this new amendments. Definition of stakeholders is also a very serious challenge for this upcoming modification. If it's in current version, we have like stakeholders like NGOs, different NGOs like human rights groups, like environmental groups, etc. In new definition of stakeholders, it's kind of definitions might change to the narrow. Like, for example, you need to provide the proofs for the individuals or communities who could be directly affected by the companies or its business partners, products, services, and operations, which is mean for it could be difficult for NGOs and civil society institutions be eligible stakeholders and protect victims. Termination of business relationships. If in current options, if any part of the supply chain, let's say, make some kind of economic violations, current law obliged to deprive all business relationships, In proposed options, no more such kind of requirement and no any kind of deadlines, which is means for you able to limit yourself with some kind of call for alert for your partners for look you are doing some illegal stuff which is we are not appreciate but please change and do according our like guidelines and commitments which is against like we're losing serious instruments because only sanctions and also depriving of termination of business relationships able to motivate stakeholders to take care and implement properly all of their human rights commitments. Civil liability of companies for damages, like as I said, for if current corporative sustainability due diligence required civil liability, proposed text gives this on opportunities for each EU member states, and we have very, very different member states as like Hungary or Slovenia, which is, we have a lot of questions how they able to do. Of course, some countries like Germany, as I had said before, in a few years ago adopted law, they also don't have clear civil liabilities guidelines, and they say for everyone free to go to the courts and or to any kind of investigative institutions and fight for their rights. So delayed implementations also. For example, in upcoming plans set for since July 2027, all EU-based companies over than 5,000 employees and net worldwide turnover of than 1.5 billion euros must, I'm so sorry, must report on what they do with each fiscal years. Right now, general modifications in proposed text said for they can add 2 more years until 2028. All EU companies have to start implement due diligence guidelines, and but in general this postponed until July 2029. We are imagine 4 years later someone in EU supposed to realize these commitments and obligations, but delay with 2 years is serious damage for all civil society as well and to all leading companies who try to show good case examples and to say for look we are pioneers on this area, we are increasing our efforts, but with this postponed for 2 years changing amendments, it's also serious issues for civil society institutions because as human rights group we have a very limited capacity building resources to working on this topic, and we're planning to establish lots of programs and we try to learn and improve our skills, but with these modifications probably I think we have to really be careful in preparation of our action plans as like a civil society because again with today most important stakeholders who is supposed to be eligible partner doing the due diligence is like independent media and civil society institution, mostly like anti-corruption groups and human rights groups and other groups who work on good governance. But what we observe in authoritarian member states today, lots of countries, such kind of, again, my own country, like Azerbaijan or Belarus or Russia, local capacity of the civil society completely destroyed. And it's a serious question, how is it possible to organize effective due diligence if stakeholders like civil society and independent media are already excluded from this process? And what's supposed to be done in the next upcoming years, and what we saw like decisions like U.S. administration depriving the foreign aid also seriously damaged all of these capacity building programs. And I think now European Union member states supposed to increase their programs and support this kind of capacity building programs for the civil society, because again, it's lots of things supposed to happen, lots of things supposed to be done, but with limited investment to capacity building, we don't have any chance to change something. And again, I'm speaking today as like Azerbaijani human rights activists. In our countries, like we even observe all of these biggest multi-billion money laundering scandals, which is when country literally lose dozens of billions of dollars, and everyone from civil society and media exposes. All of these people right now jailed in Azerbaijan. We have more than 350 political prisoners, and imagine 40 of them is like top anti-corruption journalists and experts who expose all of this. And again, alarming, it's not only applicable this alarm for countries like Azerbaijan, Russia, and others. Many Asian, African, and Latin American countries supposed to have this kind of upcoming challenges, and we need to find solutions for do this what we're planning with all our partners. But unfortunately now I would like to stop here, and maybe we can.
Thanks. Many thanks, Amin, for giving us a comprehensive overview. And as we still have some time left, I would like to turn to our audience and open the floor for any kind of questions, remarks, or intervention that you might have, if there are some. Yeah, sure.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for this interesting topic and the responses. Talking about stakeholders, shareholders are also pushing multinational companies to go through all this sort of way to increase the amount of profits. And who does that benefit? It benefits the multinationals who are involved in stock markets like in the States and so on. When BlackRock and these type of big financial groups control the stock market, why aren't they taken to task for these type of questions? Because they are the ones who are creating the corruption. Money talks and bullshit walks, and they've understood that. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Who would like to reflect on that?
So I just, with companies like them, fight for us is super difficult, and it's like one of the serious problem of the civil society's lack of funding. Nobody wants, even from private philanthropy, invest such kind of initiatives, and even like perpetrators like Danske Bank, when this multi-billion scandal which has happened in between 2012 and 14, and total average of the stolen assets is like more than $250 billion. Imagine this kind of banks, they paid fine for all law enforcement agencies, like let's say Justice Department and Treasury Department of US, find peaceful settlement. The first bank, yes, recognize themselves as a guilty perpetrator and corrupt bank, but it's nothing changed for victims. We shame and blame this bank since 2015 and say, look guys, money which is you stole from our countries, from Russia, Azerbaijan, and they helped to steal this money. and from Azerbaijan and Ukraine, it's more than 250 billion. And bank make multi-billion profit from this. And we say for like at least profit, which is your shareholders receive it, you're supposed to return this to the civil society of a nation which is this money stolen. Until today, like even Danske Bank, which is like a leading bank of the like one anti-corruption pioneer nations, like as like Denmark positioning themselves, and according to the Transparency International Index, they have a zero tolerance for corruption. They didn't do anything. They paid fine, and they even denied to support civil society initiatives to prevent future financial crimes like this. And again, for finding solutions, and especially for the issues which is you're mentioning, it's kind of for us, like for the civil society, it's new kind of challenge. We are living in the global oligarchy system, and especially today, what's happened in the U.S. when one of the most rich person, Elon Musk, decide to with one finger stopped all foreign aid, put under like literally humanitarian disaster half of the world. We still didn't see any response from EU. What we see, EU tried to make small, similar steps, like what Ursula von der Leyen does. It's like clearly they try to, of course, they try to say, for we try to be less bureaucratic. It means for EU establish their own doji, what US already implement, and how to effective be here, we will see soon. But again, I don't have, to be honest, clear response to your question. It's only like anti-corruption watchdogs able to expose guys like this. But again, even today, one of the reasons why, for example, USAID is one of the biggest donor for anti-corruption and good governance projects. They are just literally destroyed. Like, and if one person able to stop activities for several dozens billions dollars, like non-profit activities, responding to your questions right now is very difficult. We're only able to like raise our awareness, like you or us, and to call and speak with all stakeholders for look, something must be changed.
Many thanks to your response. Is there anybody else willing to take the floor? Yeah, yes, please. Yeah, yes, madam, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a really good insight. My name is Joyce, Ambassador and Deputy Permanent Representative of the United Republic of Tanzania. Mine is more of a comment, just to really thank you for really good insights and good information that you have shared with us. I learned very well on the issue of due diligence and the work ahead of many countries, especially countries in developing countries. My request would be the way forward to look at incorporating more countries that are really into risks, especially developing countries, and you come up with more of data-driven findings of what exactly is happening on the ground, and involving or inclusion of stakeholders from those said countries. With that, I thank you so much.
We highly appreciate your comment and your involvement today. And I would say on behalf of the panel that we are more than open for any further cooperation. And I believe that there was somebody else. No, yeah, gentleman on the back, you were hesitating. Yeah, if possible, to introduce yourself.
I have a very, very quick question. You mentioned due diligence as a tool used mostly by the bad guys, by the bad companies. But how about the data-driven findings? How can we use a due diligence with the companies that could actually use it to empower local communities more long-term, to bring better added value, economically speaking, purely economically, to the human rights holders, to bearers and holders, to local companies. If you have any maybe in the pipeline, any particular project or idea in that regard. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. When we are speaking about the private companies, corporate situation is much more easier. Because when we are speaking about government, usually sometimes our hands are closed. When you speak about the company, all the procedures needs to be built internally. I know the compliance, due diligence, okay, we used it before, but now it is trend, in many companies. Even in Swiss, I meet companies that they have a lawyer, for example, advocate for, I don't know, divorce law, and now he is doing compliance. It's good, but it needs to be more serious concerning the business, the regulation. It needs to be internally built all the necessary documentation, procedure, that company follow the regulation according to standards. For example, Swiss, or when we are speaking about Swiss, US, they have good standards, it can be used. Second thing is use of AI-based project. As I mentioned, for example, for government, for countries that they are receiving international funds, we have a project that it is a fair bid. It is for public procurement. Okay, for example, at the moment, Ukraine says that we have Prozora, that it is more accepted by international community, but it is database. The problem is, as a person who worked as a commissioner for corruption prevention in Ukraine for a period of time in cities, I can say there are a lot of human interference. When you have human interference, there is risk of corruption. Okay, it's not, we don't call everybody is involved with corruption. Okay, sorry, time is limited, but using of AI technology can bring platform. If it is interested, we can discuss about it later, and capacity building to give necessary education to people who are working in companies or organizations, even government, because many people don't know they are involved in corrupted system or corrupted organization. Thank you.
Many thanks, and unfortunately, we have to wrap it up as we have some time constraints, but I would like to thank our panel, and I would like to thank our audience for being here with us today, and we look forward for any further discussion with you.